Welcome to the first Kirblog of 2015. Hope you all, again, had a lovely holiday season and blah, 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 all that crap. But the new year begins. We're good to go. Hopefully this will not be the last Kirblog of 2015, unless I get hit by a truck tomorrow. So this question for today's topic comes from Jacob Tucker. There was a time when you were known mostly for your fan-made works, such as Parody Rangers and the Nintendo collabs. Now you've dedicated your time and focus on original stuff, such as TOME. Have you ever dealt with fans that have made it difficult for you to expand on your original content because they were more interested in the fan-made stuff? Was it easy or difficult to make the shift from fan-made stuff to original stuff? And how are you able to make your fans understand your transformation as an artist and content provider? Okay, so I have talked a little bit about this subject in various ways, just kind of like bits and pieces of this particular subject on a lot of other Kirblogs. Way too many to link here, so I won't bother. I'm just going to kind of keep this one contained into one thing. Plus, I mean, what if this is the first Kirblog you've ever listened to? Then I'll go in with a fresh start. Okay, little brief history, as I often start these things off with. So I've been coming up with stories and characters and creative things for my entire life, more or less. Ever since I can remember, really. I feel like for most people in that position, when you're a kid, you always you come up with fan ideas for shows that you watch, or as a kid, I had a lot of stuff like that with my obsession to the time, Power Rangers, Pokemon, Thomas the Tank Engine, what have you. That'll be another Kirblog topic down the line. But so I feel like we always go through that, and I feel like that there is a certain excitement about getting to do something creative with something that you didn't make. I mean, that's the whole basis of fan art and fan fiction and fan productions, animations, things like that, So it's certainly not something that I look down upon necessarily, but I'm going to get more into my general thoughts on that when it comes to content creation. But yeah, so I definitely had fits of that as a kid, but I was always much more interested in creating original stuff, because as soon as I kind of got an idea of you can actually make this stuff, once I kind of got that into my head, I was like, oh, well, then I want to make my own stuff. And I just kind of determined, oh, well, yeah, I mean, there's no way I'm going to be able to produce a thing that contains characters and stuff that I don't own, that I didn't create. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So I figured that out pretty early on, and I started making my own characters and making my own stories and etc. But it was interesting. So by the time I learned Flash, which you can go back and listen to my very first Kirblog ever, which was how I got into doing animation in the first place for that story. But when I first learned Flash and began producing any sort of animated stuff at all, it was kind of an interesting experience, because by that point I had a whole bunch of original concepts and stuff, and yet the first couple things that I produced ever in Flash was I did an anime-style opening sequence to this webcomic I used to read called The Rogues Gallery. It was on Fireball 20XL many moons ago. And I did this anime-style, crappy-looking sequence with MS Paint drawings, and it got blamed off of Newgrounds, and I was sad. And then later I came back and I submitted Mega Man vs. Plunger Man, which was a Mega Man vs. Mario stupid Flash that I did with Mike Lucas. We were 15 at the time. And that got accepted. And those are the first thing that got blamed was an original IP that made by somebody on the internet, but it wasn't mine, so it was still a fan work. And then the first thing I submitted that actually got accepted was a Sprite movie. And also Inuyasha in a nutshell, but we don't talk about that. And then I started producing TV Tome Adventures, which was the primordial old version of Tome. By the way, I don't recommend looking up any of this stuff because it's awful. But I'm just, giving history. So I did TTA, and I did that for several years, and it didn't really catch on too well. And then I got the idea for doing Parody Rangers, which I'm sure I've talked about before. And I got into that and et cetera, and then that was the first thing that got me any sort of attention or notice on Newgrounds at the time. When I was submitting this stuff, on there. That's what I meant by bland, by the way, and getting submitted, because I was submitting to the Newgrounds animation portal. This was 2004, 2005. So 2006 was when I did Parody Rangers, and that was the first thing I did that got any sort of attention, because it hit the front page, it reached 1 million views, etc. But and then that was kind of the beginning of my, I guess, not downward spiral, but that sort of era of my life where I was like, I'm going to do parodies because that's what gets me attention. Anyway, so I did all that stuff. I did the Nintendo collabs. I did Brawl Taunts and all that stuff. I just did all unoriginal stuff. And it was weird to me because the stuff that I wanted to make when I was really little, I had all these concepts already. I had Balancing Act. I had all these game ideas. I had TOME. And the stuff that I was focusing on for like several years was just all unoriginal stuff, all these cartoons that just had characters that I didn't create myself. And it was I want to say maybe like 2008 or 9, somewhere around there. I was getting ridiculed by people for doing only parody stuff. And I something just kind of hit me towards the end of college by the time I was finishing up the final of the 3 Nintendo collabs. I just, I realized I just had this day where I looked in the mirror and I was like, what am I doing? And then that was kind of what changed my mind and kind of, shifted me back into what I really wanted to focus on in the first place, which was my own original stuff that I'd come up with from the ground up. I remember, okay, there's this one artist, this very talented animator, Ryan Miller. He used to go by Artil, or RTIL. And he and I had a lot of it. He was one of the people that used to rip on me many years ago for doing nothing but unoriginal parody stuff. And then over time we got to know each other and we actually talked it out and kind of swapped ideals and things. And I remember the first time I met him in person was at Comic-Con. It was like many years ago. It was 2008, I think. And I showed him, I was like, this is the stuff that I really want to do someday. And I showed him, all of my original characters and things. I had my portfolio with me that year. And he was like, listen, dude, I think that's great, and I think you should totally do all that. But I'm just going to warn you for something. YouTube is unfortunately more or less becoming like the replacement for TV, which, is a for better or worse type of thing. I was kind of the slow beginning of that sort of realization for everybody. It was still kind of the early days of YouTube, but it was prevalent. It was kind of looming overhead as like this is what's going to be. This is going to be how it is now. But he was saying like, yeah, I mean, listen, when you get around to this stuff, you just got to be aware that it's going to be an uphill battle because your audience is going to know you for the stuff you're doing right now, which is all this Nintendo parodies and Parody Rangers and parody, and it's going to be difficult to get them to to change their minds. So flash forward several years later, and I'm doing I finished my thesis film, which was a big deal for me because that was a property. Balancing Act was something I'd been setting on for well over my lifetime, and finally putting that into a tangible form was a massive deal for me. And then for TOME, I went in remembering that conversation with Ryan and knowing like, yeah, this is going to be an uphill battle because most of the stuff that people know me for are Parody Rangers, the Nintendo collabs, and Brawl Taunts, especially at that time. And people still arguably know me for that stuff and maybe only that stuff. Or like the Mario RPG music video and all that kind of stuff. So I went into it knowing that. And that said, it was an uphill battle. It still technically is because now kind of going into the next point, I'm very proud of how well TOME has managed to do for what it is. Which, what it is an original property on the internet. It is extremely difficult to get people to give a shit about your original stuff on the internet specifically. It's very hard. The few people that have managed to do it have my undying respect. People like Happy Harry with Starbarians, Chris and Zach doing Hellbenders, Ed's World. I mean, even after his unfortunate passing, and Tom Scott and the rest of his crew, carrying the torch and still doing fantastic with that. All this stuff that like those are very few examples, and I mean there's a few more as well. But you look at animation on the internet, and the fact of the matter is it's ironic to me now because it's like what I was ridiculed for back in the day is now what everybody is doing on their own individually. People always say, "Oh, why don't you do another Nintendo collab?" It's like, what's the point? Everybody is doing individual Nintendo collab vignette segments without my involvement anyway. The trend is, oh, this movie just came out, or this game just came out, or this TV show is really hot right now. Time to do a cartoon about it. That's kind of like the general consensus of like, how you can make any sort of money. Because now also the money is a factor. there was ad revenue on Newgrounds, but it was nothing compared to nothing, better or worse beats YouTube ad revenue. And, if you get millions of views and millions of subscribers and lots of clicks and watch time, for animation, it's like that's how it goes. It's also why Let's Plays and stuff like that are also really popular, because it's really easy to hook people when it's with material that, is popular, that you can just kind of, prey off of and use the name and face of and do something with that without having to build something from the ground up. Now, on the flip side, aside from the money-making thing, which that's just part of, that's a necessity of life, if you want to be honest. Doing these and monetizing these Kirblog videos are also part of, how I make a living. So who am I to lecture that? But also from a fan perspective, I understand the passion behind it. I remember I had a conversation with Zach Bellissimo, who I've known since high school, really talented artist. We were talking about, the concept of when I was being ripped off by a lot of the Newgrounds, artist community at the time, and people really looking down on me. I remember talking with Zach about this, and I was saying, Zach, you really like Betty Boop, right? He's like, yeah, of course. If you had the opportunity to, pitch and produce a new incarnation of Betty Boop as it's like a new series, would you do it? And he's like, yeah, well, I would make it in it would be good. And I was like, well, yeah, that's always the goal. You look now later, you look what Lauren Faust did with My Little Pony, for instance, and whoever produced G.I. Joe, Renegades, and new incarnations and stuff. I imagine. Oh, and Cyril Neely producing the new Nickelodeon Ninja Turtles is another good example. Sorry. I imagine, and I know for certain cases like that, like Lauren Faust and Cyril Neely, they were fans of those respective properties growing up, and they know them really well. So it's exciting for them, as fans of that stuff, to create a new incarnation of it and do something creative with it. Even yesterday I was talking with Ivy Tran and Sarashu, who do the music for Steven Universe, about the music in Smash Brothers for Wii U and 3DS, and she was talking about, I wish they would stop just doing the same remix of, the Legend of Zelda theme over and over. And I was like, well, think about it. They have so many different composers from different companies getting to do arrangements on the soundtrack of that game. I imagine it must be an honor for, a lot of those composers to finally get the chance to do remixes of, the Legend of Zelda theme or the Mario theme or the Star Fox theme or whatever, these, really legendary melodies. Like for us, sure, it's remix of Legend of Zelda theme, number 700 or whatever. But for them, it's I finally get to do this. This is such an honor and so great, because I grew up with this music, or I really like this composer's work or whatever, For me, the Nintendo collabs were because I was like, hey, it's fun to write cartoons and funny situations and things for these Nintendo characters that I love and have so much respect for. Or even on the Mario RPG music videos, it's I did those because that's my favorite game of all time, really, when it comes down to it. And and even with Brawl Taunts, it's I remember people were like, why don't you guys make merchandise of Brawl Taunts, of all the jokes and everything? And Kira and I were like, no, because we have respect for Nintendo, and we don't really want to make money off of their intellectual properties. But that's, that's what I mean, is there's a certain level of respect that comes with that, and not necessarily in fact, I was also alerted by somebody recently, people uploaded the Nintendo collabs and a lot of your stuff from Newgrounds, and they're making money probably off of it, and, making a lot more views than you. Why don't you get a copyright claim or something? And I'm like, I don't want to make money off of that stuff. I don't, I would rather focus on the original stuff, and it's whatever, it's not important to me. If they're going to do that, then they can do that. It's an inevitability, and who cares, and I guess from my own personal perspective, I don't know if I'm really answering the question with all this. Sorry, guys. For me, I feel like it's worth the struggle of fighting an uphill battle for your own original IP. I designed TOME in a way that would be really accessible for people, and I've built up a bigger audience for my stuff because of that. I've reached the point that I've gotten through TOME. And that's not to say that the stuff before it wasn't, weren't stepping stones or anything, because they were, and they were very integral to, building up a name for myself at all, of course. And I learned a lot of lessons, all those parodies and all those things that I did on Newgrounds back in the day. As I've often said, everything I do is an exercise. Even TOME is an exercise, as passionate as I am about that show and as much work as I put into it, it's still an exercise, and it's a stepping stone to something bigger and better and things that I am going to do. As far as I guess originality versus parody. It's like, you know, I have my own like reservations and opinions about a lot of that stuff. I look at certain things that people get known for, or certain things that you know make more attention, or that they get more attention and make more money, or get more fanfare or whatever. And it's like, I get it, and there's really no point in getting your panties in a twist over it, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's not something that anybody can really help it. What I try to do to help it is just to have a little bit more original content out there, so that there's some creating a balance in the world by melding all four elements together. So what am I saying with all this? I think that an uphill battle to get that stuff recognized is worth it. I think that it won't make you an overnight success, but I think that it's a journey that is absolutely worth taking, and it's one that I don't regret. I don't really think that there's many things that I look back on and be like, oh man, I wish I didn't do that. Like, you know, there's certain finite decisions, but I think overall everything that I've done has been an experience, and you know, you got to make mistakes to learn from them and do better. I think that's just kind of a part of life. And you know, where I've gotten with everything that I'm doing now, you know, getting people to understand now what it is it's not like, oh, I wish you'd do another Parody Rangers or Nintendo collab or whatever. Now it's, oh, I wish the next episode of TOME would come out, you know, really soon. You know, and that's that. If anything, that's the goal accomplished. Even if it's not like, oh, I'm not making millions of views, or I'm not making, you know, bank off the ad revenue or whatever. I'm still like I'm still managing to make an all right living off of what it is that I do on a weekly, daily basis, whatever it is. You know, whenever I get content out, the following that I have from TOME has been overwhelmingly positive, and it's something that I'm very, very much appreciative of, as I often tell you guys and will continue to tell you all. But you know, it definitely was a long wait. I mean, I've been doing this show for 3 years, and only now has it gotten to this point, and you know, et cetera. But I really think the ultimate proof was the crowdfunding campaign. I think that was the thing that really got, you know, it's like, okay, this is the ultimate proof that I was able to really pull this off. You know, and again, that's all because of you guys. You can't control what it is that people want to watch. It's up to you to just make something that's good that people want to watch, and then if it's truly good, it'll get out there, it'll spread around, people will really enjoy it, and then you know, that's the goal. You know, and whether it's with your own characters, or whether it's with somebody else's characters, or for something that you know you're a fan of or whatever, it's like, you know, there's different ways to go about that. I think that there's always something to strive for. I think that personally that there are there's a greater sense of satisfaction you can obtain with when it's something that you built entirely from the ground up, and without having to rely on, you know, stuff that you didn't necessarily make. Because it's like, you know, I think about it from this way. I was completely almost forgot to bring up this point. When I look at, like, you know, these parodies of, like, you know, anything, like the newest game or movie or TV show or whatever, I think about, well, who's gonna make the content that you're making the parodies of in the first place? And that's why I try to add something further to that balance. It's like, I want to make something else, you know, that will inspire people, and you know, that might, you know, stir some creativity in the minds of others, and, you know, see where that goes. I think that that's really worth, you know, all the hardship and all the time it takes to get stuff out there, and to get people to listen and watch and everything, you know. I feel like I'm kind of going in circles, but hopefully I addressed the question. And, you know, I wanted to go with something, I wanted to open the year with a topic that was kind of, you know, near and dear to the heart, and something interesting that everybody could take something away from. And so if you're a person who wants to do like a comic or an animation or anything, or art, fan fiction, you know, or writing in general, whatever, anything you want to do, you know, consider those things. Keep that in mind, and you know, weigh your options, and really think about what it is that you care about most, and what it is that you want to accomplish, and then you can kind of go from there. You know, I do what it is that I want to do because, you know, it's what I'm the most passionate about, and I feel like the fight is worth it. And you know, if you want whatever it is that you've created to, you know, get any sort of recognition, it has to be outstanding, and you have to fight for it. You know, you do have to really, you know, it has to have that special something that you got to put into it to really, you know, have it be truly recognized. And I think that's about all I can say about it. So thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed the first Kirblog of 2015. If you have suggestions for other Kirblog topics in the future, please let me know in the comments below. You can also hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, whatever you feel like. And that'll do it. So thanks for listening, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye.